Welcome back to Briggs on Books, our international talk show where I get to talk to authors from all over the world about their books, their process, their ideas, what's coming up next. And so I have the best job in the world. I get to read most of the day, and then a couple hours a day I talk to authors. And I really enjoy this. By the way, check out this book. I always point the wrong way. In the Dark, a mother's... let's bring the author in. I can't see the title from here. Here is our guest, the author of the book, Nancy Kuykendall. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Tell us the full name of the book, please.
It's In the Dark, A Mother's Reflections on Her Son's Addiction and Recovery.
Yeah.
Long title.
Yeah, that's... now, by the way, I want to say this is not your first book.
No. It's not my first one. Happens to be number 12.
Number 12, okay. And this is a nonfiction book. Are the rest of yours fiction, nonfiction, novels?
A little of both. Most are nonfiction, but I do have one fictional series. It's 4 books together, and then some nonfiction short stories.
Short stories, too. Now, This is nonfiction. This is your story, is that right? In the Dark?
Yes, it's my story. I call it my son's story, but he calls it my story. Okay. So it's our story, I guess.
Tell us about the book and what brought you to write the book.
Actually, I didn't think I would ever write this book. It was my son's idea, the son who's mentioned in the book. And he's been clean and sober over 12 years now. And he told me about 10, 11 years ago, Mom, you should write a book and share how it was for you. And I really never considered it. I didn't even know how it would happen. But about a year ago, I thought, you know what, I'm ready to tackle that. And he said, Mom, it's not about me, it's about you. So what it really is it's not even one consecutive story. It's bits and pieces put together through the years of what I remember and how I remember it. 20 years worth of things.
And your son was an addict for that period?
He was. 20 years meth and alcohol and cigarettes, which are tough too.
Yeah. And you said you were literally in the dark for that.
I was, because I've been told I'm a naive person, but I was much more naive back in those days when I was younger. And I had never had any experience seeing people use drugs, drink. It was nowhere in my history, in my family. I knew nothing about it. Even in high school, I was never approached with drugs, though I knew people who used them. I mean, it's like a miracle that I wasn't. Yeah. But I knew nothing. So when there were the signs, or there was a smell, or there was odd behavior, I didn't really know how to connect that. And so I was in the dark. But it's also Jason being in the dark, because when you're living in the deep depths of addiction, you're in the dark too. So the title fits us both.
Now, what I find as I interview authors on these similar subjects is a lot of times people feel like they're the first one going through this. They don't have any resources, nothing to look back on. Is that what you felt like?
Well, a little bit, yes. At least I was at a loss. If other people were going through it, I didn't know it so much, or what they were doing. And I didn't even know where to begin. And as Jason pointed out to me, he said, Mom, it's your story, and maybe other people who are going through it, other moms especially, will relate to it. And so that's really what prompted me to try to write the book.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to move us to, is that, yes, you've gone through this. Other people are about to go through it, or they're going through it now, and maybe reading your book would give them some direction, some insight. What will your book do for them?
Well, I hope it gives hope. That's really the main thing for me. And I struggled with the title because it says recovery, or addiction and recovery. And I thought, well, if I put recovery, what about all the people, moms, dads, who've lost their child? Yeah. There was no recovery, and that kind of worried me. And then I decided, but if I put recovery, it adds an element of hope, so that those who may still be going through it can find out, well, how did he recover?
Yeah, and that there is hope, that because some people think you can never get through recovery, and your son did, and good for him.
He did. Yeah, it's a miracle. 20 years worth.
And I mean, literally, we have dozens of authors who talk about this subject, and what I want to say about those authors and you is you're very brave to do that. Step up and kind of open yourself up for people to look at your life and maybe get something learn something from what you've been through.
True, and sometimes when you step out on this kind of thing, you get a little bit of friction from people, or they think you shouldn't share. Right. But I went over this with my son many times, and it was his idea, and he's like, Mom, say what you want to say. say what you need to say, make it about you, you know, as much as possible. And then I let him read the whole thing before it was ever published, because if he didn't like something about it, then we could work on it.
Yeah. Now, so it is a lot about your journey then, your journey through your son's addiction.
It's a lot of my reactions and my emotions, my questioning, my wondering, my floundering around, not even knowing what to do or that it was even happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell actually a couple stories in here that now, this much later, we can kind of laugh about it. It's really not funny, but, you know, finding out that that smell I kept smelling was him smoking meth. I didn't even know he smoked meth. I didn't know how he did meth. Was him smoking meth in the bathroom. And I was just being told it was his aftershave, and I don't know. You know, it was just, I was totally in the dark, is the point. And so maybe it'll help somebody else not be so in the dark, you know, if it's coming up. Because for Jason, it started, I thought, at age 14. He said, no, it was more like 10.
Oh, boy.
And that's just unfathomable.
Yeah.
You know?
And interesting, it's the perspective of a mom. I like.
Yes.
That's very interesting that it's from the mom. We have a lot of books from the addicts, but from the addict's mom, that's interesting. Did you have any role in him getting into recovery or recovering?
Well, I think yes, in that, you know, we took him, most of this story took place after he was 18. So there was a lot of time there when, you know, when you have an 18-year-old man on his own, you don't have a lot to say.
Yep.
But we did take him into our home for a while. Some things there came to a head, which caused us to have him lead. And that's really maybe the biggest, hardest crux of the story, how I got through that. But I think he told me after the fact that, Mom, aside from his own self-awareness and a moment of clarity, as he puts it, he said, Mom, I always saw you sober, and I always knew you loved us. So if you're there, I mean, I just felt like useless. But if you're there and you're somehow involved, they can take that as your love and interest in their problem.
Was there an issue at some point where he took advantage of you, moved back in the house, didn't straighten up like he said he would or should?
Well, we set some pretty stiff rules, and he broke those by having paraphernalia and drugs in the house that I was unaware again, but my husband was suspicious. And when he went to look and found it, that was it. The rule was broken, and the rule was, that's here, you've got to go.
Got to go.
That was hard, you know.
And did you expel him from the house?
We did, and that's the hardest part of the story. That chapter's called Anguish, and that was a mother's anguish. I mean, they might as well have been ripping my newborn baby out of my arms, you know.
Yeah.
So it is from a mother's perspective. But, you know, I give Jason a lot of credit, because not too long after that, he decided on his own to go into the Job Corps. That helped him tremendously.
Some structure in his life?
And he didn't like that, and he didn't like authority, and he wanted to do what he wanted to do. And the great thing about that was his decision. Nobody suggested it or told it to him.
Maybe that was important, that it was his decision.
It was important. It was his decision.
The story of having to throw him out of the house, I mean, that's a very, I hear that story all the time when parents have to do that, and it's tough, I know, but you know, you can't let him do that in your home.
Well, there were other kids in the home too, and he had agreed to the rules. I mean, literally, I can tell you, I was so broken up. I mean, I literally couldn't speak for like 24 hours. I couldn't even form words. I couldn't even form the words to tell him, you have to go. So my husband formed the words and said them, and, you know, everybody was upset. But I got to tell you, the whole book is filled with hope and a lot of prayer by this mom. And I saw things come about that moved Jason eventually towards the recovery. And a lot of it, in the end, had to do with his own resolve. You know, you can't do it for them.
Great. Tell me who this book is for. Who should be reading this book?
This book is especially for moms who have an addicted son or daughter. Could be for a father too, but it is written from a mom's perspective. It's for somebody maybe looking for something to hold on to, some kind of hope. I've had a couple mothers come forward who are in this position. Their sons are not in recovery yet, but they feel like there's still hope for them, and that's the big thing. Never give up.
Right. How about, is it a cautionary tale? Should all moms read this book?
Well, that's a good idea, because if you have young children and you don't know what they're up against or what's coming their way. You may not know, like I didn't.
Right.
I mean, I just had no clue.
Yeah, no.
And so this might make somebody be aware
Yeah.
and watch a little more closely. I would say so.
Yeah.
I would hope so, you know.
Well, I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by the book, and I've got people in mind that I'm going to give this book to.
Oh,
and
great.
I've seen so many people struggle with the addiction issue, close to me, and we've it's had some pretty sad endings sometimes. But it sounds like you're having a happy ending.
We have a happy ending, and thank God for that. It's just it doesn't happen for everyone. But one thing in this book I'd like to say is that I start out by telling the mothers it's not your fault.
Great.
And in the end, it's not your fault because you can do everything possible. I mean, a parent can do everything possible to guide and lead and raise their children in a good way and help them, and they still make their own choices.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I try to make it a little bit easy on the moms because we will just guilt ourselves,
Yes.
And I feel free of guilt, and I want other moms to feel free of guilt too, even if they've gone through it.
Yeah. By the way, Nancy, I have your web address on the screen. What would our viewers find there?
That's my website. It's just they'll find a homepage that shows some books. They'll find an about section about me. They'll find a section where they can go to buy the books. Mm-hmm. Those are linked to Amazon, although the books can be found many places.
Yeah.
They'll find some free, occasionally free ebooks they can click and get, and they'll just find newsletter information. There's about 6 pages. They're blogs, weekly blogs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I encourage our viewers to go there and find your website, and especially if you're struggling with the struggle that Nancy went through herself a few years ago, you might get a little camaraderie going or help you figure some things out in your life. Nancy, we're almost out of time, but I just want to give you a few minutes to say anything you want to say about your book, about your life, about anything in the world.
Well, I've heard it said by many, I think even by you, that when you want to write a book, it's a pretty big thing in front of you.
Yeah.
And it was to me. But one step at a time and you can get there, and you can learn a lot about the writing and publishing business and do a lot of it yourself. And I really enjoy that. So if you're a person who has a story to tell, who wants to share nonfiction or fiction, something for others, go for it and tell your story. And you get the editing you need and help you need for the rest of it. If you don't format, you don't edit, you don't do covers, there's help for that.
There's help for everything, that's right.
There's help for everything. You can learn to do it yourself. And if you feel like you have a story, share it.
And by the way, let's say again, how many books by you alone, where you're the sole author, how many do you have?
12.
12. And you're talking about publishing in the process. Does it get easier as you go?
I found it did. I never sought out a traditional publisher. I didn't want to wait that long. I think
Yeah.
I'm too impatient for that.
Yeah.
I did do some self-publishing, and then I went into independent publishing, and I learned how to format, and I learned how to do covers and things like that. And I really enjoy all of that work, so it's not a bother to me. But you can learn a lot about it going through any kind of help with self-publisher or doing it yourself. If you're a hands-on person, you can try it yourself. There's free programs out there.
Yeah, and I think that maybe we're saying this, if somebody has their book kind of hacked out, kind of on paper, and it's not formatted, not spelled correctly, that's okay. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it's okay in the beginning, but you would want to get some editing.
Yeah, but there's people that help, is my point. There's people that help you down the road.
Yes. And if there's anybody listening who needs steered towards some help, they can certainly contact me on my page, and I can steer them different places for help.
That's very generous of you. And you're very brave, too, for coming out with the story, and I appreciate it very much. And our people, I'm going to share this with. By the way, go to Amazon, wherever you buy books, you'll find In the Dark. And by the way, when I went to Amazon and I clicked on Nancy Kuykendall, it just opened up all these books. And that's why I was a little late starting. I go, wow, look at all these. I went through all of them. But go order this book, but don't click one time on In the Dark. Click 5 times or 10 times. Order 5 or 10 copies, and there'll always be somebody that could value receiving this book as a gift. And I always try to order and give away books. So thank you so much, Nancy, for writing the book, first of all, and for being an inspiration for our potential writers, and being an inspiration for moms out there who may, hopefully, not, but may have to go through what you went through, and maybe they can find some inspiration through your story.
Right. Hopefully not, but if the book helps, great. I'm happy about that.
Very good. All right, and for our viewers, don't go anywhere. We will be back with another author right after this.